So before we get started, a small introduction of myself. My name is Brittany Lodge, and I'm PLT Canada's Youth Programs Coordinator, and I support a lot of the youth programs offered at Project Learning Tree Canada. I want to take this time to acknowledge that PLT Canada's office and much of our team lives and works in the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. We recognize Algonquin Nation's time-honored relationships with and stewardship of its lands and waters, and we are committing to upholding our shared responsibility to continue that stewardship for present and future generations. All right, so before we get started, everyone, this webinar is being recorded. Please make sure your microphone is on mute. You can unmute during the Q&A portion of this call, and if you need assistance, please ask in the chat and one of my colleagues will answer you. I also want to let you all know that closed captioning is offered during this webinar. So if you want to turn it off or turn it on, you can click on the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen to either hide or see your subtitles. Like I said, when we got started, we had some technical difficulties, so we're not able to offer French translation today, but Myrna, who is on the call, is able to answer any questions that you might have throughout the webinar. So the learning outcomes for this webinar are the practical takeaways that you will gain from today's session. So during this 2-hour webinar, we will discuss the value that newcomers to Canada bring to the green sector while uncovering barriers that they often face when seeking employment. We will explore how green job employers can reduce these barriers with meaningful work experience and how they can benefit from newcomer talent. Finally, both employers and immigrant-serving organizations will go into regional breakout rooms and share their thoughts on the challenges and opportunities in recruiting newcomers. So this webinar would not be possible without the collaboration and support of the Immigrant Employment Councils of Canada. The Immigrant Employment Councils of Canada is a formal network of 8 immigrant employment councils across Canada that are a collective body which builds effective and productive employer partnerships and solutions. Their aim is to significantly improve the labor market outcomes for immigrants and support a stronger Canadian economy. Today we have regional representation from the IECCs, and they will be facilitating our breakout rooms later. So today I will be moderating the session, and we have 3 incredible speakers. So Sienna from Employ will be speaking on behalf of the Immigrant Employment Councils, and she will be highlighting how employers can reduce barriers for newcomer youth.
Sorry to interrupt, but I've just been told that interpretation is working now.
Okay.
So for people who would like to actually participate in French, we have the service available right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Myrna. So we have Sushant Chopra from Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, who will be speaking about his experience in entering the green job market as a newcomer to Canada. And last but not least, we have Hanan Nena from the Books, Art and Music Collective, and she will be speaking on the newcomer entrepreneurial spirit and her lived experience as a newcomer to Canada. All right, so PLT Canada is a non-profit initiative of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. So SFI is an independent non-profit organization that works in standards, conservation, education, and community to achieve a vision of a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests. So like I said, PLT Canada is a part of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. SFI is advancing sustainability through forest-focused collaborations through our 4 pillars of work. The first pillar being standards in forest management and products, the second pillar being conservation efforts on the ground, and the third pillar being community action. And finally, we have our fourth pillar of work, which is the education that we deliver through PLT Canada. So at PLT Canada, we want to ensure that everyone, including newcomers, has the opportunity to learn about and succeed in green jobs. Thus, our education and career pathway work is focused on connecting people to the value and benefits of our forest throughout their lives and building the skills they need to be successful in a future green career. Since 2018, we've placed over 3,700 youth into green jobs across 12 provinces and territories by supporting over 200 employers in the Sustainable Forestry Initiative and Canadian Parks Council networks. In addition to job placements, we offer a high-quality mentorship program for youth and forest conservation sector professionals. We provide opportunities for youth to attend networking events and training workshops, and we also offer a wide variety of career resources via our website. In addition to our career programming, we also develop environmental education materials for parents and educators. We currently have a bunch of free resources available on our website, and we are always adding more. So at PLT Canada, we have been working extremely hard to build diversity into our programming because we know that we need more diversity in the green job sector. We have placed over 580 Indigenous youth into green jobs, as well as supporting positions for newcomers and youth furthest from employment. We also support diverse youth in our programs and are actively working on resources to support diverse youth in their career exploration. Okay, so why green jobs? As we transition into a more sustainable world, new and different jobs will and have been created. So the jobs are there. And this graph illustrates just how much growth is projected for available jobs in the green job sector. As you can see that in 2017, there were approximately 10 million green jobs available worldwide. By 2030, the number of jobs in this sector is expected to increase sixfold. This equates to approximately 60 million new jobs across the globe, meaning that we need to start preparing newcomers for careers in the green job sector today. So, as we can see, there is a huge opportunity in the green jobs for newcomers. So now is the time to create the space and the community to bring these newcomers in to join the 12% of forest sector workers that are immigrants. So part of what we want to do today is to help you understand the scope of the opportunity and to give you the support in hiring newcomers into green jobs. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to our first presenter, Sienna J. Taylor. So Sienna is speaking on behalf of the Immigrant Employment Councils of Canada. Sienna is the project manager at Employ, and Employ's mandate is to connect employers with newcomer talent. As project manager, Sienna works with an incredible team of people to provide programs and services that connect immigrants and refugees with mentorship and employment in Southwestern Ontario. Sienna is also leading the launch of a new employer engagement initiative that focuses on supporting employers in the recruitment and retention of newcomers, including education and training based on equity and inclusion. All right, so without further ado, Sienna, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I just want to say that this is my second time having the chance to work with PLT Canada, and they are a perfect example of what young people can kind of bring to the table. It's been an incredible experience, and if you aren't fully plugged into what they have to offer, I would encourage you to do so. I just want to confirm, do you have my slides up?
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. We're keeping it colorful today. So as Brittany said, my name is Sienna and I'm a project manager for Employ. the Immigrant Employment Council supporting the Southwestern Ontario region. So Employ is a part of the Immigrant Employment Councils of Canada, and both our organization as well as the employers that we serve have benefited hugely from this network. And so I would encourage all of you to make sure you get a chance to connect with the IEC, the Immigrant Employment Council that's in your region. Make sure you check out our website after the session and take advantage of the resources that are available to you. Combining the resources provided through the IECs plus the resources provided by PLT Canada, you will be in a great position. So I have the opportunity today to share some insight on behalf of the council, and everything that I'll be sharing, we've learned from one another's experiences and from the communities that we serve. So if you want to flip to the next slide, during today's presentation, we'll be talking about engaging newcomer youth in green sector jobs. We'll explore why this should matter to you as an employer, the benefits that newcomer youth can bring to your company or organization, a little understanding around the barriers that these folks are experiencing and how we can try to reduce those barriers. And of course, we'll offer some best practices in recruitment and retention of young newcomers. So it's always important to get a good understanding of the current context of our country before we dive into this. So when it comes to immigrants and the labor market, what do we already know and why should this topic matter to you? So first off, we know that Canada's fertility rate is 1.5 babies, well below the replacement rate of 2.1. What this means is that Canadian families are having less children than they used to. By 2030, Canada's 9.2 million baby boomers will all be of retirement age. Immigration currently drives 82% of Canada's population growth. And if we look more specifically to the labor market, Canada's worker to retiree ratio in 2036 will be 3-to-1, which means that we have less workers able to replace those that are retiring. By 2040, 23% of Canada's population will be 65 or older. And by 2030, immigration could add 5 million workers to the labor market. So although there's going to be this mass exodus of boomers from the workforce on the horizon, and in reality, we know that a lot of folks throughout the pandemic have taken advantage of that opportunity, we'll say, to retire early. We know that immigration and newcomers, and especially young newcomers, can offer a viable solution to this gap that we are seeing in the labor market. It's also important to take a look at international students in Canada. When we talk about young newcomers, we're really looking at mainly two distinct groups, those that come as children of families immigrating and those that come to study in Canada. So when we look at international students, Canada is the world's third leading destination for international students. That's pretty incredible when you think about all the different places that folks could be going to for education. There are over 642,000 international students across the country, and Ontario accounts for close to 50% of the international student population. So a lot of those folks are in one space. 60%, and this is the really key point here, 60% of international students have communicated interest in becoming permanent residents following their studies. So these are not just folks that are coming to Canada to study and go back home. These are folks who are coming to study in Canada because they want to stay in Canada and they want to work in Canada. International students contribute approximately $22 billion to the country's economy and sustain over 170,000 jobs. So what does this mean? It means that we have incredibly talented, educated young people right here in our communities that employers can and should be taking advantage of. But if we have so many young talented people, why are our provinces continuing to experience high rates of job vacancies? So, sorry, could you flip to the next slide? All right, perfect, thank you. So what do newcomer youth bring to the table? So when we think about this gap that exists, we know that there's a lot of talented newcomers. We know that we have job vacancies in the green sector as well as all sectors. So why is that connection not happening? Do people not know the value and the benefit that newcomer youth bring to their organizations? So I think it's important to think about why we need to make this intentional effort to tap into this youth and look at some of the benefits that these folks bring. So if you want to flip to the next slide, awesome. Awesome, awesome. So there are a ton of benefits to engaging newcomers and specifically newcomer youth. One is renewed energy. We hear from companies and organizations all the time that young people, and especially newcomer youth, bring this renewed energy into their organization. There's an excitement, there's a youthfulness, there's a desire to really contribute in meaningful ways. And people feel that across their teams. We also know that having young people and having more diverse workforces increases innovation within our teams. We also know that companies and organizations experience better decision-making and faster, more creative problem solving. We also know that there's higher employee engagement when we start to diversify our workforce. And a big part of that comes from the fact that young newcomers are bringing diversity in thought, in experience, and in skills. And bonus, when we engage folks who are coming from all over the world, and especially when we tap into that younger population, we're gaining tech expertise in our teams and that social media fluency that's becoming more and more important as the years go by. We also see less employee turnover when we're able to really diversify our workforces, both when it comes to age as well as when it comes to culture and language and experience. We see improved hiring results. And one of the really great things that I know a lot of companies like to hear is increased revenue. So whether you are a nonprofit or a for-profit, we're all bringing revenue into our organizations to do the work that we do. And by diversifying our teams, we're able to increase that revenue. When you engage young newcomers, it also gives you an opportunity to tap into global networks or just diverse networks within our country here. So there are a ton of benefits of working with newcomer youth. And if we know employers need staff, and we know that newcomer youth not only have the desire to work, but have a lot to offer in the workforce, why is that connection not happening? Young newcomers, like all newcomers, are still facing major barriers to employment in all sectors, including the green sector. So how can we as employers and community partners reduce barriers for these folks? So first, we have to think about the kinds of barriers that young newcomers are coming up against, and we have to recognize the intersectionality of those barriers. This is a group of people that are experiencing ageism, racism, and linguistic discrimination all at once. And there are a lot of folks who may also be coming up against different barriers based on their identities. Oftentimes, we hear from employers that they have concerns around the work ethic of young people or around their skills and level of experience. As employers, we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, what are the assumptions that I'm making about young people, and where do these assumptions come from? Unfortunately, there are also still high reports of racism, both in the recruitment process as well as within workplace culture. And we have to remember that just because we aren't hearing or witnessing overt forms of racism does not mean that more covert or less obvious forms of racism aren't seeping their way into our recruitment processes and our work cultures. We need to recognize that many of the systems in our country are built on systemic racism, and we need to do what we can to take a step back, reflect, unpack, and figure out how we can do our best to reduce that. We also know that linguistic discrimination is a huge barrier for all newcomers. A lot of employers make assumptions about language ability. It's important to remember first that there is a difference between language and communication. On top of traditional forms of linguistic discrimination, we also know that many young people face barriers due to generational differences and expectations when it comes to the way that we connect and communicate with one another. As employers, we need to remind ourselves to be open and flexible to change and allow the evolution of the way that we connect and communicate with one another. So as an employer, how can you actually start to reduce the barriers for newcomer youth that may be coming into your organization or wanting to come into your organization? First, and probably one of the most important things that you can do, is prioritize and engage in education and training on equity, diversity, and inclusion. This should not be something that exists in isolation, but it needs to be something that is woven into everything that you do in your company or organization, from creating job postings all the way to your everyday workplace culture. It's also important to take into consideration transportation. young people and many newcomer youth do not have the same access to transportation that other folks may have. This is something that we need to take into consideration if we really want to create equal access to employment opportunities. We also want to make sure that we are taking into consideration language and communication. This is something that can be taught. And this is something that we need to take into consideration when we're interviewing folks and when we're onboarding folks. Make your language and your communication accessible to all people. We also want to make sure that we're being flexible as employers. When we begin to build more diverse workplaces, it inherently means that things will begin to shift, and we need to be open to this. Flexibility in how you interview and how you onboard and how you operate is not only going to make you more accessible to young people and to young newcomers, but it will allow you to actually tap into the benefits that newcomer youth can bring. It's not enough to just create a diverse workforce. We need to create pathways and spaces and opportunities for that diverse team to really bring what they have to offer. The flexibility may seem challenging at times because it does require change. It forces you to move away from what you may know and be comfortable with, but we know that allowing room for this change can be a benefit to your mission and or to your bottom line. And finally, we want to change the way that we look at experience in education. Anytime you talk to a young person or a newcomer, you will likely hear the same old story. I can't get a job without experience, but I can't get experience without a job. The solution to this cycle is fairly simple. We need to stop expecting young people to come into interviews already having done the job before. As employers, it is our job to recognize the skills that people have and leverage those skills through training. We also need to pay better attention to the ways in which young newcomers are gaining experience in non-traditional ways, like volunteerism through their faith communities, at home, or in other spaces. We need to dig deeper in interviews to find out more about the people that we are meeting, and we need to recognize that oftentimes young newcomers are taking on a lot more responsibility than Canadian-born youth. And that is something that can be a huge value to your organization or company. All right, so now that we know we need to engage newcomers in our recruitment efforts, and we know that they have a lot to offer, we have an idea about some of the barriers that they may be facing. So the next question is, what are the tangible practices that you can put in place right away to better recruit and retain newcomer youth? So attraction itself is where the real work comes in. To set yourself apart from other employers across the region that you reside in, you're going to want to adopt some new strategies. So get your pencils out, because these are some easy to do but often missed tactics amongst a lot of employers. So first and foremost, job postings. You want to ensure as an employer that you are creating inclusive job postings. This doesn't just mean having a statement at the bottom of the posting about being an equal opportunity employer. It goes beyond this. You want to make sure that your language is clear and concise. Use plain English and try to avoid slang, metaphors, or industry jargon. Remember that English may be a new or second language to newcomers, and we want to avoid language that requires cultural context. When we are trying to recruit newcomer youth, we also have to take into consideration that they may not have the experience in the industry because they are younger. So that's where that industry jargon can really trip some people up a lot and have them self-select out. We also want to make sure that you're focusing on essentials. Don't inflate the education or experience that you require. Be as specific as you possibly can and be accessible. We often treat the application and interview process as this very secretive thing, but why? Ask for what you need, give details for interviews, and be available in case people have questions. A lot of times, when it comes to applying for jobs, a lot of this is learned through our families. But imagine if your family wasn't born and raised in Canada. It's a lot harder to understand what this process is like, and you have an opportunity to offer that information to potential candidates. You also want to make sure that you're considering your equity brand, as we call it. Many companies have statements or policies around equity, diversity, and inclusion, but how does your company live and breathe those policies? Try to incorporate this into your job posting so that equity-seeking groups like newcomer youth know that they are welcome and feel called upon to apply. Sometimes statements like newcomers encouraged to apply, youth encouraged to apply can go a long way in terms of people actually seeing themselves in that role. The other thing that I'll remind you of when it comes to job postings is embracing change, but you don't want to embrace so much change at the risk of excluding people. So there is a delicate balance between doing creative things to try to recruit and engage millennials and younger generations, but making sure that you are still accessible to all people who might still be learning what that culture is like here in Canada. So the next step after you've created your job posting is the actual outreach process. How do you get your job posting from your website in front of faces of newcomer youth? You want to take on a proactive hiring approach versus a reactive hiring approach. Proactive hiring or recruitment is a strategy that focuses on sourcing, engaging, and attracting candidates ahead of hiring demand. It's about developing a recruitment pipeline rather than the post and pray approach, which is where we just throw the post up on as many places as we can and just pray that somebody is going to apply. We want to go beyond that. So some things that you could consider is developing a career site or page that includes some of your equity, diversity, and inclusion values. Make sure that it's mobile friendly and find ways to stay connected with folks. Start a newsletter, have people subscribe to an email list so that you can start building out a list of people who may be interested in working with you when opportunities arise. Make sure that the application process is easy and take advantage of networking opportunities in order to connect and engage with young people. Paying close attention to the opportunities and events that PLT Canada puts on is a great way to do that. Even if you aren't hiring at the time, if you're able to attend some of these sessions and engage some of those youth, you'll have a great idea of who some potential candidates are when the time comes to hire. The next thing that you want to do is, or the next point here is actually reach out. This one is so obvious that it shouldn't need to be said, and yet we find ourselves reminding companies of this over and over and over again. If we don't reach out, we are only engaging those already plugged into our community and to our company. If we do this, we're not tapping into the benefits that a diverse workforce can bring. And if we want to expand our talent pool and really create equal opportunity, we need to commit to active outreach and engagement. We also want to make sure that we're collaborating, that we're working with other diverse groups of people, both within your organization or company and out in the community. Make sure that your hiring panel is diverse, that you're engaging diverse groups of people in the planning and engaging them in the outreach. Make sure that you're developing relationships with community-based organizations that are connected to the communities that you want to reach, especially youth-led or youth-centered organizations and those that support newcomers to Canada. Bonus, you've got some great organizations right here today that do just that. So this is a great place to start in terms of building those relationships. And finally, when it comes to outreach, you want to make sure that you set targets. And what this really means is that we need to develop equity, diversity, and inclusion policies in our workplaces that are also reflected in our recruitment practices. And most importantly, we need to hold ourselves accountable to these processes and policies. This is not about tokenism. It is about ensuring that we are doing what we say we are going to do. Now, this is going to require an understanding of what demographics actually exist in your communities and what you can do to ensure that your company or organization actually reflects the communities that you are aiming to serve. So next up, after you've done your job posting and your outreach, oh, sorry, can you pop back? Sorry, thanks so much. So after you've done your job postings and you've done your outreach, you've got a pile of resumes coming your way. That's when we really need to focus on screening. And this is often where we see some of the biggest challenges when it comes to unconscious bias, direct discrimination, and understanding credentials and experience. So screening is a key activity to address if you really want to expand your talent pool, tap into young newcomers, because you don't want to be screening out really incredible talent. So if you've put your pencils away, make sure you bring them out again, because these are some really, really helpful tips. So first and foremost, I mentioned it before, you want to make sure that you have a diverse hiring committee. Ensuring that you have a diverse hiring committee is important as early as the recruitment stage. And you most definitely want to engage them in the screening phase, not just in the interview process. This helps to balance out any biases that might exist and ensures diversity of thought and experience as you screen. Sometimes what we see when companies and organizations are interviewing or screening for a youth position or looking for a young person to join their organization, they don't treat the process the same. Sometimes the questions look different, the panel looks different, maybe there is no panel. What I would encourage you to do is treat this process the same as you would any other position that you're hiring for or any other person that you are hiring for. You also want to make sure you focus on the essentials. Just like when writing the job posting, you don't want to inflate your needs. We need to get rid of this idea that we are looking for the perfect candidate and trying to check off this lengthy list of skills and qualifications. We need to focus on the essentials required to do the job and to do it well. Focus on the need to have, not the nice to have. Also, we don't want to make assumptions about the candidate's fit or even the wealth of their experience. Remember that we are all taught to cater our resumes to the roles we are applying for. So there's likely a lot more that newcomer youth can bring with them that isn't currently listed on their resume. We also want to remember that flexibility, right? When we are interviewing young people, the likelihood is they're not going to have as much experience as someone who's been working longer. And that doesn't mean that their experience or their education is lesser. It just may look different. We also want to make sure that we are assessing readability carefully when we are looking at resumes. Consider that many newcomers likely speak multiple languages. English may not be their first language, and therefore they may make written errors. However, this is not necessarily a reflection of their ability to communicate verbally or at an acceptable level to do the job that you're hiring for. Allowing some understanding and flexibility in this regard can really help widen your talent pool. We also want to remember too that if the folks that we are screening for do speak multiple languages, that can be a massive benefit to our companies or organizations. We also want to make sure that we are allowing for cultural difference. What I mean when I say this is that we have become accustomed to a very certain way that resumes should look. But if you consider that 60–90% of newcomers do not access any sort of settlement services at all, some may not have been offered guidance on Canadian-style resumes and expectations. When we think about settlement services too, who are the people that are accessing these? Oftentimes it's the parents. And so again, when we think back to where did you learn about these processes? Most of the time we learn it from our family members, from our parents. And so if we have young people and their parents are new to Canada, they may not have as much information about what is expected in the Canadian workplace. And so we want to be flexible for that. We also want to remember that it's important to focus on the content of a resume versus the design or the format. There is a difference between something being done poorly and something just being done differently. We also want to make sure, as we're assessing experience on resumes, that we're bringing in that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. One of the most important questions you can ask yourself and the panel that you're working with to screen is, what are the assumptions that we are making? So we need to always think back to those barriers that we talked about around ageism and racism and linguistic discrimination and any other barriers that young newcomers may be coming up against. And we need to remember that everybody's journey when it comes to education and employment is different, and it's going to look different, it's going to feel different, but it does not mean that the skill and the talent is not there. We also want to make sure that we're really, really focusing on competency when we assess experience. In other words, don't look for have they done this exact job before, because with young newcomers, the chances are they haven't. But what we want to look at is, does their resume and does their experience demonstrate competency in the skills that we require? And remember, when we engage young people and young newcomers in our organization, we have the opportunity to train and to teach and to educate. And especially for those working in the green sector, this is an incredible opportunity to build those values that guide the work that you do into the training. We also want to keep in mind that with international education and experience, we have a tendency to lean toward what we know. There definitely is a bias around Canadian education and experience, and older newcomers experience this and younger newcomers experience this. But I hate to break it to you, although the education in Canada is marvelous, it is not necessarily the absolute best. And another thing to consider is whether your assumptions about education experience is actually based on real knowledge or if it's just comfort. For example, we have a tendency to be comfortable with things we recognize and things we know, but it doesn't mean that they're better than something that is new to us. So that's just something really important to keep in mind when you are screening resumes. So the next big thing is interviewing. So like I said before, there's no reason that this process needs to be some big mystery where we're testing people's knowledge of how to show up for an interview. So make sure that you communicate expectations. This is an opportunity to be a guide and a mentor. Provide people information about what you expect when they come in for their interview. Make sure during the interview process that you're using plain language. Keep in mind that language gap may be there. Communication styles may be different. So you want to make sure that you're using plain language. Leverage your diverse hiring committee. So when I say this, what I mean is if we are going to put together a diverse hiring committee that may have diversity in age, in experience, in gender, in cultural background, whatever it may be, we haven't created this diverse hiring panel just to say we've done our due diligence. We're doing it because we want that insight. We want that perspective. So make sure that you actually create space for people to give their thoughts as you go through the interviewing process. You also, again, want to make sure that you're recognizing the barriers that folks face. Remember that we can't just have this very simple equation for how we think people should show up and present themselves. Allow that flexibility and understand, again, that everybody's path is different, and find ways to unpack what their skill sets are. So Brittany, now if you want to flip to the next slide. So last but certainly not least, what happens after hiring is crucial and just as crucial as the recruitment process. And what we're talking about here is the onboarding process. Oftentimes we see employers put a ton of work into recruitment, into screening, and into interviewing, but then when it comes to onboarding, they often run through the basics and then toss people into the deep end. This is not great for anyone, but it is especially not great for young people and for newcomers. So these folks are already navigating a new work culture. They may be navigating work for the first time, but they're also navigating a new culture. They are new to this country and they are figuring out a lot of stuff as they go. So a few things to keep in mind when you're onboarding are the actual onboarding process itself, community, culture, and language, and mentorship. And so just like the other tips that we talked about, the best practices, these are easy to do, but often missed. So when it comes to the actual onboarding process, you want to make sure first that you are planning ahead. Take the time to plan ahead. That will allow, the more organized you are, the calmer and easier the transition is going to be for a young newcomer coming into the organization. You also want to make sure that you, in that planning ahead, that you're telling the person that you're bringing on board what it is that you expect on day one of them, so that they can feel confident when they show up for work. You also want to try to engage the wider company or organization in the onboarding process. Oftentimes when young people, and especially newcomers, come into new workplaces, they can feel that, there's that new kid vibe, and trying to get plugged in and feel that sense of belonging can take some time. So if you're able to engage the wider team in the onboarding process, that can be really, really helpful and give them an opportunity to meet different people, find out what they do, and understand how they're going to be working with other folks. Again, and I can't stress enough, we want to be flexible. Everybody learns differently. So the onboarding and the training process that you have laid out for one person may not work exactly with the next person. So talk to the person that you've hired, find out what works best for them in terms of training and onboarding, and try to adapt so that you can meet people halfway. And you also want to be very clear about your expectations. Don't assume that people coming in know exactly what you want. Let them know what is expected of them through this onboarding process. What do they need to have accomplished? When do they need to have accomplished? And what does that communication look like between the person that's onboarding them and themselves and the rest of the team? One thing that's very important to keep in mind throughout this onboarding process and over the first few months is considering the introduction of community, culture, and language. And so what I mean by this is the actual community that you're in. So remember, these folks are not just new to your company or organization, they're new to Canada, or they're new to the region that they're in right now. And one of the best things that you can do is make them feel not only welcome in the company or organization, but in the community at large. What can you offer? What insight can you offer them? Let them know about the restaurants that are around, the local shops, events that happen, places that they can check out. Let them know that you're committed to them and their sense of belonging. You also want to introduce them to your work culture. A lot of times we don't teach people this stuff. We kind of expect that they'll walk in, they'll see things happening, and they'll just know. But we want to make sure we take time to let people know, what is the culture like? Is it informal? Is it very structured? What can you teach them about the culture so that they know how to engage? And of course, language. We talked about this a little bit. Language is a huge, huge thing, and communication is a huge, huge thing. Introduce people to the way that you connect, the way you communicate, and the language that's acceptable in the workplace. And one of the easiest things you can do is offer people a glossary of the terms that are going to come up a lot. There is nothing worse than when you're new and you're sitting in a meeting or on a call and everybody's tossing out all these abbreviations and acronyms and you have no idea what's going on. So an easy thing you can do is offer people those glossaries. But again, try to remember to be inclusive in the way that you communicate with people and introduce people, provide explanations, and make sure everyone is on the same page. And finally, we always encourage this is mentorship. We know the benefits of mentorship outside of the workplace, in our personal lives, and in the workplace. Mentorship is huge. So if you can build in a mentorship program or even a buddy system, especially during their first few months of someone's employment, that can have a huge impact on retention. It allows people an opportunity to have someone they can go to about anything, the questions they don't want to bug their supervisor about, or the things that they feel maybe are silly to ask. If you have someone there who's committed and dedicated to supporting that person, it will go a long, long way. So that is all I have to offer today. And I know we're going to get lots of opportunity in the breakouts to discuss further. But if anybody does have any questions, we are at that point.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sienna. I don't see anybody raising their hand, but I might just ask, from your personal experience working with newcomers so much, what was the biggest lesson that you learned? Like, it sounds like you've talked about like onboarding, mentorship, recruitment and retention, but for you personally, what was the biggest lesson that you took away from your experience?
I mean, there's so many lessons and they kind of come every day. But when I think specifically about newcomer youth, one of the things that's always stuck with me, and this is something that I learned through volunteering and then has continued in my career as well, is that the amount of time that newcomer youth have available to them is very different than Canadian-born folks. And of course, everybody is different and everybody's experience is different. But one of the things that we see is that newcomer youth play a big role in supporting their families, in supporting their parents, in supporting their communities. And they may not have the time to get as much, traditional experience as other folks do. And I think that, that's why I like to remind people to take into consideration all those other ways of gaining and building skills, because they may not have the time to work, a customer service job all throughout high school, but there may be other ways that they are showing up and doing a lot. And I've found too, even through my volunteer experience, that newcomer youth are so driven, so driven. And that's not to say any less about anybody else, but they have a different journey and it shows in the way that they show up. And so that's why I push so much that flexibility and then diving in deeper to really understand, learn about those folks, because what they have to offer is just incredible.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. So we actually have another question in the chat from Jasmine. So how to attract and retain immigrants in the green sector due to the nature of the job in the sector, which are not stable and higher. So Jasmine, I'm not quite sure of your question.
Well, you know what? I can try to. I think I know where she's getting at with this question.
Okay.
And you know what? One of the things actually, and Rania, who is our network coordinator for the Immigrant Employment Council, one of the things that she talked about when we first met with PLT Canada was that we also have to remember that, you know, people have specific, you know, their experience is based on where they previously lived, where they were born, raised, and went to school. And so there's a lot of things that are different in Canada, right? And there are a lot of things here that may look very different due to, you know, climate and environment and all this sort of thing. And so what I would say in terms of being able to attract people is make sure that you're educating them on it. And this goes for everybody, right? Newcomers or not, let them know what is the experience actually like working in the green sector, working at your company or organization. And although it may not be stable and you may not have that high pay, there are still benefits, right? And so really elevate those benefits. Because we also know that for a lot of newcomers, it can be really hard for them to find that permanent, stable employment. And so finding sometimes short-term contracts can be a great opportunity to build that experience and build those skill sets. And so make sure you're just offering as much information as you can and really, really highlight the benefits of it.
Awesome, thank you, Sienna. So I see, Jerry, that you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Sienna, I'm curious from the perspective of the international student and the limitations of 20 hours of work as a maximum. What are your feelings about that?
Well, my feelings about it, my feeling is that, you know, I would love to see some of those restrictions change, because we know that we have these gaps in the labor force. We know that international students are an incredible, they contribute in incredible ways to our community. So I'd love to see that change. But again, I think, you know, for employers, remember that flexibility, right? If they can't offer as much time, it doesn't mean you turn that person away. Think big picture. Maybe it means you're bringing on 2 people to cover that time. But then also knowing too, if you're interviewing somebody who was an international student, they're planning on staying in Canada, remember that those gaps in experience may not be due to their own choices, but those kinds of limitations that exist. We also know, you know, the reality is that depending on people's status, the programs and supports that they're eligible for and have access to based on funder requirements is going to look different. But I think as community organizations, as employers, as IECs, we can do our best to continue to support as many people as possible, regardless of those sort of requirements. You know, open up what you offer so that you can engage and support folks in that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sienna, for your amazing presentation. I really loved listening to you. So if you want to connect with the Immigrant Employment Centres of Canada, my colleague Chuya is going to put the link in the chat. I really encourage you to check out their website. And yeah, without further ado, we're going to switch it over to Sushant. So Sushant Chopra is going to be speaking next, and he is the Program Management Specialist. Sushant has over 6 years of experience working with various government frameworks and designing and running public welfare programs on various scales. He arrived in Ottawa, Canada in 2021, after which he worked for the Sustainable Forestry Initiative to help youth from diverse backgrounds find and gain meaningful employment in the environmental sector in Canada. In the past, he has worked with various departments in the government of India. So without further ado, Sushant, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And yeah, I would like to say that, yeah, Sienna has really hit the ball out of the park. I think everything she has said, a lot of things really resonated with me as a newcomer youth here and in the new country, in a new workplace environment, and, you know, looking through jobs and everything she has said has resonated with me. Let's go to my education background. So I am basically an engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, and then went on to do my master's in renewable energy. And after that, I worked at consulting in India in smart grids and energy, and then finally went on to work a bit with the World Bank, and then with the Planning Commission in India. So my experience has been mostly into and with the government sector, trying to build new programs, create funding frameworks, and helping small businesses get to work. So, and I came to Canada, as Brittany also mentioned, in January of 2021, and I landed in Ottawa, and after some time found an opportunity with PLT. So I worked with PLT for some time. Brittany has been an amazing colleague, and Zach and everyone. Yeah, and there I in fact work on diversity and inclusion frameworks for newcomer and youth with um, um, disabilities. So that has been definitely a a game changer for me as well, and I could relate to everything what we were working on. Post that, after some time, I got an opportunity with the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority um, as their senior coordinator with the Strategic Business Planning and Performance Unit, where I am helping them manage the whole business, the whole authority as a business, and helping them build strategy for the next 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years, where the authority is looking themselves, and how we can, of course, help the development of watersheds in Ontario and the other works that authority continues to do. Looking back at my experience, I would say definitely not. It has not been an easy thing to get a green job. And the key is to be only determined and do sustained efforts. That's what I can say. But the one thing I think I wish the employers could do is make the process more transparent and make it more feedback based. But I must say I got some cool feedback from few employers. In fact, I had one employer call me up and giving me a feedback on phone. So I would not say that I did not get any feedback from any employer, but yes, as a newcomer youth, when you put so much time and effort into making a resume, cover letter, and then you put a lot of time in preparing for the interview, you expect a bit of feedback at the end. And even if you don't get selected, that feedback it's very valuable for someone like a person who is new to the country, new to the culture, and is looking everything with a fresh eyes, I would say. Based on my lived experience, I think the thing that would make you feel welcoming and supported in a workplace, I would say the staff. By all means, the staff in an organizations, they are the ones that make you feel welcoming and supported. Be it PLT, be it Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, I have always has supportive colleagues. If I talk about PLT, like I have worked with Brittany, Zach, and Paul, so many of them, and every time I had some doubt, I could reach out directly to them and ask them, I need some help on this, and they were always there to support me. And even in my current position at the TRCA, I think that is the same. I can reach out to my supervisor, I can reach out to my colleagues and ask them, and yeah, they have been always supportive. And in fact, I would say a small thing like at this point of time, we are looking for staff with my colleagues as my colleagues. So yeah, anyone I interact in the organization, they all have kind words. You are doing it great. You are learning good stuff. You are learning new stuff. Great. We are here to help you if you need anything else. So even that small thing that goes a long way in getting that feeling that you are wanted, you are supported, and you are welcomed in this workplace. So yes, I think the staff is the answer for me. Regarding the green sector and newcomer retention rate, maybe if I can say, uh, I would say there's no perfect candidate for any sector, be it green sector, be it business. I'm into business and finance, but yeah, in any sector, there's no perfect candidate. They're only determined candidate, which you make and you grow them into a perfect candidate. And it's just by working with them, you can grow them, grow their skills, what they already have. You have to basically leverage what they already have and make it and mold it into a Canadian experience. So I can reflect back on my interview. I was asked this question that uh, have you done this? Have you done finance before? But then again, my answer was that the basics of finance always remain the same, be it any country, be it any place in the world. It's just that the cultural difference and the way you see things becomes different. But yeah, the plus, minus, multiply, divide, they always remain the same. So yeah, that is what is it. And I think these things, these small things, leveraging the experience of newcomers can really help in growing the retention rate uh, in any workplace. And I must say, newcomers are great employees, and I think studies also say that they tend to stay longer in an organization, a lot longer than maybe Canadian-born um, employees. So yeah, I think yes. Uh, One thing that I wish green employers can take from my experience, I think transparency. I would say transparency in the work, in the whole hiring process. I think that is the key. Uh, there was one organization which I interviewed and worked with. They had this whole blind review process. So you can simply go in there. You don't have to put your name. You don't have to put your date of birth, anything. You just answer a set of 4 questions, and that's where they call you for an interview. And I think I really like that. I still remember that. It's been 9 or 10 months since I went through that process, but I think that was really amazing. That was using some third-party tool, which they did that, but it was amazing. And even if you don't pass that process, you receive an email. You receive an email saying that on which skills you were uh, in comparison to other candidates. Maybe in writing you were at 80 percentile. Maybe in stakeholder management you were at 60 percentile. So that kind of feedback is really helpful because it gives you certain specific skill sets to work on. It's not as if um, a general thing that you could work on. Uh, you need Canadian experience. That's a very broad term to say. But yeah, if you give a newcomer, if you give an interviewee a fixed number of skill sets to work on, then they have a much easier job to do, and they would be more focused on working through that. So yeah, that is from me. And I think, yeah, the table is all open for questions. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Oh, Sushant, I thought somebody popped up for a question, but I don't see. I have a question. So I'm just, when you were talking about the blind experience, I'm wondering, like, did the feeling of not like having your identity not like known and not having that interview make you feel more included in the hiring process? Or would you rather have an interview with somebody and talk about like your experience, not necessarily like your Canadian, like I guess I'm just wondering like why the blind experience made you feel so much more included?
Okay, I'll try this one once more. So the blind process is like in the first in the first screening process, they give you a set of 4 questions. You answer that 4 questions and you get an interview call. And in the interview, you are the first one. They see you first time in your interview. They know your name first time in the interview. They know your experience is the first time in the interview. I think that is something very amazing. So initially, you just have your skills to demonstrate from those 4 questions. And once you go into the interview, you talk about yourself. So I think that is very transparent in the manner that at least you don't have to prepare a resume, you don't have to prepare a cover letter, and you have skills to demonstrate in those 4 questions. And finally, when you appear in the interview, you can talk about them, your experiences at length, apart from your skills, what you have already mentioned before in those 4 questions. So that is something that makes you more inclusive. I think that employer even told me that, I just wanted to say thank you for giving all your time to this. And that is that employee is the one that I got a call from at the very end, and they said that you were in the top 3 and there were 110 applications in total for one position. You were in the top 3. I would like to say thank you to you for putting up all your time. You were a great candidate, but we have gone through with another candidate. But yeah, keep applying to us. We really liked your profile. So that, even that goes a long, long way in, feeling you, in giving you a feeling of welcome, supported, and, having a tangible feedback.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sushant. So we have another question in the chat for you. So did you find networking a key to your success in finding a position?
Definitely yes. Definitely yes, I would say, because even in this Toronto and Region Conservation Authority position, when I applied there, I had already gone through a Newcomer Youth Green Economy project, which is a small which is a program run by the TRCA at their education vertical. And they did reach to my mentor to ask about my feedback. That was the first thing they did before they even caught me on the interview. So definitely, yes, if the more people you know, the more you learn, first of all. And the second, they could also maybe provide you with some kind of, they could provide you some good leads to some interview processes. They could connect you with someone or something like this. So they reached out to my mentor, and my mentor gave them their feedback that yes, this person is good to go. You can interview them. There's the I can vouch for this person. So yeah, it's all networking. I think all of these boil down to networking.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sushant. I really appreciated listening to your story, and I loved your feedback from the blind experience and your feedback from how employers should give feedback after interviews. I think that's super helpful. Thank you so much. Without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our last speaker of the day. So we have Hanan, who is here to speak with us. Hanan is a student at Ryerson University, majoring in politics and governments and minoring in the law. She is currently working as an Ontario Regional Advisor for the LRB at the House of Commons. Hanan has also worked at the Minister's Regional Office, Office of the Deputy Prime Minister Office, and the Minister of Finance. She is the founder of BAM, Books, Art, Music Collective, a youth-led collective in Ontario and formerly in New York, working on empowering equity-seeker individuals through art and community engagement. In 2021, Hanan was elected to serve as the next president of Politics and Governments Association at Ryerson University and managing editor of the Refugee Experience Cluster at the Migration Initiative. She is one of the advisory committee members of the National Promising Practice in Accessing Virtual Mental Health Supporting Refugees During COVID project. She is an ambassador for the immigrant and refugee communities, neighborhood, friends, and families to raise awareness and promote end to domestic violence. In 2019, Hanan was chosen to be one of the Daughters of the Vote representing the federal riding in Scarborough-Guildwood in Ottawa. Hanan is also the co-founder of the Starter Kit. The project was created to discuss various pathways and find solutions to problems faced by those wanting to attend post-secondary education specific to newcomer needs. She has worked for the City of Toronto and multiple local and international organizations. So without further ado, Hanan, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Brittany, and thanks everyone for tuning in to listen to our experiences, stories, and recommendations. It's kind of feel like awkward, like presenting after two wonderful presenters. I feel like I have nothing to add, but I'll talk more about my personal story. But before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge that I'm joining you virtually from Toronto, and I'm joining from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Wendat people, and now Toronto is a home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. You heard my professional bio, but I'll share more about my story. I'm also a recent newcomer to Canada. Older than you, Sushant, I arrived back in 2016 and I came under the government support program of welcoming and resettling Syrian refugees. Probably you heard about the program back in 2015, 2016. So my family and I were lucky enough to be resettled under that program, and we made Toronto home. And since 2016 until today, I've been working in different sectors and launching projects. As you heard, I'm currently leading BAM Collective as well. And I still work until today with newcomers and refugees. So a lot to share, but I will get into the questions. I did not prepare any slides because it feels awkward to share like slides about my personal stories. So I'll just direct it to you. But if you have any questions while I'm speaking about my story, please feel free to put it in the chat and I'll make sure to address those once I'm done. So the first question, it kind of relates to the second question. So I'll mention both and then I'll answer it because I'm providing tips for both. So the first one, how newcomers and refugees can bring their entrepreneurial spirit to the green sector. And the second one was how employers can create opportunities for newcomers. When I thought about the two questions, the first one came to my mind was identifying opportunities, but also identifying and defining the green job sector. And I'll tell you why. So the first one, I'll start with the newcomers. There are several factors. That's why a lot of newcomers are not encouraged to go into the green sector. And I'll start with the first one, which is culture. So this is my personal story. I don't represent all people. So if you're a newcomer and you don't relate, it's totally fine. But I'll talk about culture. I was raised in a Middle Eastern family. My parents gave me multiple options to pursue as a career. One being a doctor, two, a pharmacist, an engineer, third, and then lastly, a lawyer. So at least I had multiple options. So I had several options to pursue in my career. And then I did go for science. I failed, so I quit sciences and I told my parents I cannot be a doctor, even though they used to call me a doctor since day one. So the conversation on green job sector and other sectors was not encouraged in my family. So I felt I did not know that much about it, so I did not go into it. And at the same time, if you're not encouraged and if you don't have enough knowledge, you cannot encourage other newcomers, even if you work with them, to go in that sector. So I noticed that there was a gap. And then I pursued, if you're curious, politics. So I disappointed my family and I went for politics, which was a no to them. So I'm currently in politics. But I really wanted to understand other newcomers. So when I started BAM Collective back in 2018, my friend Hani and I, both of us are Syrian newcomers to Toronto. We were told that because we're newcomers, we cannot get into what we want. Hani is a legally blind photographer, and I am a woman in politics. We were told that because at that time we spoke a shred of English, that our accent could be a barrier for us, and also being a newcomer that is not understanding the system is also a barrier for us. So I've always heard the no, and you can do it, and it's too early, and that encouraged us to start BAM Books Army as a collective. So we started the initiative back in 2018, and we wanted to create opportunities for ourselves as recent newcomers, but also for other newcomers and other equity-seeking groups. Since 2018 until today, we've leveraged so many initiatives across Canada and New York City. We created jobs for us and we created jobs for other newcomers, and we worked on encouraging them to get into the green sector. I'll tell you more about the interest that I noticed through working at BAM of newcomers going into the green sector. But first I will talk about the second component of why we're not encouraged to go in green sector. So if you're noticing, oh, I have a gap in hiring newcomers, one, culture, and two is the life experiences that we go through. For me, I know it's an individual investment to go and read. Now we have technology and the internet, so it's easy to read and go online. But also due to the newcomers experience, sometimes even though if you're a young person with so much passion and energy, you're not able to go and do the research for yourself and find the resources. I had to escape a war, and my number one priority was finding safety and finding a job where I can sustain my parents, but also sustain myself and then continue my education. So going into the green job, which was not something I was looking for. And I read one of the questions about how can we encourage newcomers to go to the green job, because it's not highly paid. And that's why we need to think of the culture, because that's what our parents tell us. It's not sustainable. You cannot go there. You can't find a job, go to be a doctor because they pay more, right? So there is that misconception. So we'll need to bring knowledge and awareness on opportunities and tell them that you can work in the green sector, and identifying and defining the green sector is so important, because people think, oh, it's only about climate change and environment. Well, there are so many things that you can do. You can manage a project, for example, and people don't know that, right? So we'll have to bring awareness on that component. And then for the employers, how can we create opportunities? It's the same, identifying the green sector to the newcomers. So when you're opening a new position, when you're posting a poster, so your marketing and outreach strategy has to identify and define green sector. When you say a green sector, not all newcomers will understand. And I tried to open this conversation when I was working at BAM. Not so many youth know what is the green sector. So you'll have to communicate on that language and identify it, and be clear on what you're looking for, from the newcomers when you're hiring. In terms of the interest, so probably if you are hiring newcomers, you'll be like, well, I identified it. I used perfect materials online, and I made clear that I want newcomers. So what else I need to do? Is there an interest? That's the question that might come from newcomers. And if there is no interest, or if there's an interest, how can I reach them and give them the opportunity? And I'll answer both questions. So the first one about interest, when I worked at BAM, what we usually do, we usually engage the youth. So we go to them and ask them, what are you interested to work on? Climate change and environment was something that they're interested in. So we decided to offer programming on greens and environment, and we collaborated with an organization called Environment Muslim. They serve mostly the Muslim community, but we worked with them and we launched a book club. The book club was called People Planet Pages Book Club, and when we opened the membership, we received a lot of newcomers that were interested to join. So when they joined and we started to meet them virtually, they started to open conversations that they want to understand more the environment and climate change. Now they have the opportunity in Canada. There are more resources for them. So there was an interest, and then we decided to listen to them. So what we did, we launched, I'll share the links right after once I'm done. We launched a competition to create a digital book. We called it Our Climate, Our Story. And we found an interest from youth, newcomers, youth across Canada, interested in green sectors, interested to talk about climate, about environment, and just be involved to share their stories and share their emotions, not just emotions of, oh, I'm in a safe country now and I'm happy to talk and work in this field, but also emotions of anger, like about the struggles that they face when entering such jobs and when no one is caring about the climate. So we opened this competition, we received a lot of stories, and we worked on the book that is now considered the first book ever worked and done by people of color youth, for people of color youth. It's on our website, so I'll share it once I'm done. So there is an interest, and I don't have data on the interest, but I know from my experience working with them, and I still work with them, there is an interest to be in the green sector, but we'll need to find the opportunities to make it easy for them to fill in the gaps and help them to integrate into our sector. How do we do that? One is collaboration, and I think Sienna shared a few points. I can relate so much, Sienna, to what you said, and this is something I always implement. In the outreach, what I would encourage you to do is reach out to your target audience and collaborate with community organizations or individuals. It's so important. Collaboration is your key. So let's say you are looking specifically for youth, go to youth-led organizations. If you're interested to work with organizations serving newcomers, go to organizations serving newcomers or indigenous, whatever your target is. Collaborate and be clear what you're looking for. I need to hire newcomers. Could you please share my resources with your clients or connect me to the newcomers? Offer collaborative workshops, offer mentorship, give them the resources, and then they will be able to support you. And my advice that I always say, I'm currently working for government, and I still believe the power comes from grassroots. Go to grassroots organizations, specifically the ones that are led by young people. They have the power, they have the energy, they have the passion, they have the connection. They are just looking at bigger resources like large funding or connection, but they are the ones that are connected in the community, and they can connect it to your target. So collaboration is so important. And I think we also touched also today about the Canadian experience. So this is something people, like I feel angry when I talk about it, because whenever like newcomers apply for jobs, they're always asked for the Canadian experience. And I've been working since 2016 until today in different sectors. I worked for companies and all levels of governments, non-for-profits, collectives, you name it. I still don't know what is the Canadian experience. Like, what is the Canadian experience? And I always ask that question to newcomers that go to interviews, and they're like, oh, they want a Canadian experience. I'm like, what is the Canadian experience? Please treat newcomers ask for their input. Like, ask them what can you contribute and bring to the job. Don't ask them, oh, do you have this? If you don't, then we can't hire you. Because newcomers come with so many experiences, even like at a young age, our personal experiences that forced us. For example, I was a former refugee. I was displaced in a country like in Turkey, but I had to work, for example, there, and I had to learn so many skills to be able to find a job. So I do have skills. And when I came here, I was like, oh, let me go to Starbucks. I applied for Starbucks and I worked for Starbucks, and I'm like, I'll get the Canadian experience. And I worked for them for years, and I did not know what is the Canadian experience. So please listen to them and value their experiences and be their support system. They'll always come back to you. So make sure to always have the answer for the where and what. And if you don't, it's okay. Just tell them you'll be working with them to find the answers for them. But I'll tell you, newcomers and refugees and immigrants have so many things to share. So imagine someone bringing international or their personal experiences, and then the skills that you'll offer through the workshops and the mentorship. Imagine combining both. You'll have a powerful person that will do so much to your project or the position that you're hiring for, but also they'll bring their personal connection, which is the target that you're looking for, and the newcomers that you need to have. I'll just end it because I know we went over time today, and I'll tell you about one thing that I want you to take away from me that I always mention whenever I talk about newcomers. In 2016 and 2017, my two first year were super challenging. I was the only person speaking English. I was at that time 17, 18, did not know what is happening around me. So I was lost. And people at that time, imagine being lost, being forced to flee and leaving everything behind, not just education and home and like school, leaving people behind. In 2016 and 2017, people were telling me, you cannot do it. You'll not be able to do because you're a visible Muslim, you're a newcomer, you had an accent, blah, 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 the list goes on. In 2018 and 2019, so after 2 years, I used that time, so if you're a newcomer, please do so, to invest in myself, connect with people. So connection is so important, and listen to them and just share what I'm interested in. Like I've always looked for opportunities, and I took those opportunities, even though sometimes they were so challenging, but take the opportunities as a challenge to yourself. And it's always two things. Whether you lose in the opportunity, but you learn, or you win, which is a win for you. So always accept opportunities. And in the last 2 years, so after COVID and now, I've scaled so many things. My BAM Collective was nominated one of the finalists for the Toronto Award, which is the biggest arts and youth award. We won so many grants, and we're operating across now Canada. I've secured a job in politics, and one thing I tell to people that told me, oh, you cannot work in politics because you're a recent newcomer. Now I advise caucus members on what to do for our government. So the thing that I wanted to take is, when you work with newcomers or when you're looking to hire newcomers, see them, but also hear them. So don't just take them just because you want newcomers and you want to apply for funding and say, hey, we have newcomers and we're working with newcomers. It's great that you're working with newcomers, but hear them. Newcomers want to be seen, but also to be heard. Always ask them how I can support you and what can you contribute. And that's it for today. Thank you for listening to my story, but I'll take questions if you have any.
Awesome. That was so amazing, Hanan. Like, I am so touched and so moved by your story. Does anybody have any questions for Hanan? I'm watching the chat blow up
I'm reading all
with
of
praise for you questions.
I have a question for Hannah.
Sure.
So I just would like to know what kind of advice you can give newcomers when it comes to overcoming language barriers. You mentioned that when you came here, it was a big challenge for you, and I'm sure it's the same thing with so many people, especially when they end up having an accent despite mastering the language. So what advice could you give them?
Absolutely. And as I mentioned, when I came, I spoke like barely English. And the one thing that helped me was volunteering. Of course, like whenever you ask someone who learned a new language, they'll tell you movies or listen to music and talk to people. It's so important to do those things. I'm not a movie person, so I did not watch movie and TV shows. So I chose volunteering. And when you volunteer, I think what's cool about volunteering, you're able to develop your language skills, but also those interpersonal skills when meeting people, learning about the new people, but also sharing your culture. So I feel there is a cross-cultural connection here that I always encourage. So volunteering was a great way for me to improve my English. For newcomers that coming like in a year, like it took me 2 years to improve my English, but let's say for newcomers that just came last year and they want to apply for jobs, I still encourage them to apply. Probably will have a language barrier at the beginning. Like when I worked for Starbucks, someone asked me to give them cash a loonie, and I'm like, what is a loonie? Like, tell me like $1, for example. So you'll be able to understand when you volunteer, when you get the experience. It's not easy, but you can do it. And I think Abby, you're next. Brittany, I'm helping you, so I'll just take up the questions. Go ahead, Abby.
Thank you, Hanan, for sharing this amazing story and of resilience. I'm just wondering how your parents are happy or not happy with the career you choose and what you're doing today.
For sure. Well, my parents were, when I started in 2019, I started my program at Rice studying politics and governance. So when I applied, I did not tell my parents. So they knew I lied to them for like a year. I'm doing sciences, but I was doing political science. And when they started, obviously they're on my social media, they started to see that I am volunteering for like a political candidate or I'm working. They're like, what's going on? Like, you're becoming a doctor. Why are you like giving so much like time outside of school? And I'm like, well, listen, I can't hide it no more. So I told my parents. They still like until today think becoming a doctor is a great career and I should do it. But they're happy and I know they're proud. My dad always share my pictures on those WhatsApp groups and oh, my daughter will be one day a politician, even though I don't know if I'll be a politician, but he knows I'm working in politics. So I know they're proud. You know, your parents are proud when they start sharing your photos with their family and they're like, oh, see, my kid is doing this. But yeah, they're happy that I chose what I like. And they know that like, this is my passion. This is what I like to do. So they're proud of me. But again, they would prefer me to be a doctor. Sienna, sorry.
Hi, yes, I was just, because somebody had asked that question around language, and one of the things I just wanted to say that, you know, one of the things that we always tell employers from like that side of the perspective is that, you know, there's actually research that shows that if you have a negative perspective around somebody's language ability and accent, whatever, it actually does make it more difficult for you to understand. So maintaining that positive and open perspective when you're engaging people who may speak all different languages will actually help you to be able to connect and communicate more. I also think, you know, it's important for people to remember too that if somebody has an accent or a different dialect, it's likely because they do speak multiple languages. And so maybe focusing on what that offers at your company or your organization could be a great place to start. I just wanted to put in that 2 cents because I always, you know, I know that's something that comes up all the time with employers and we're constantly reminding them that this isn't a bad thing, this isn't a hurdle, this is a huge benefit.
I agree, and I echo what you said. When I applied for my position that I'm currently working, it's like an advisor for Ontario, the largest province, and French was something. I'm not that fluent at French, but I can understand. So when I applied, they asked me like, it's a French and English, so how are you going to deal with it? And I was like, well, you probably work with constituents that are like newcomers that they speak Arabic or Turkish. I'm giving you Arabic, Turkish, English, and I'm learning French. So they offered to give me a French tutor. So if you are able to offer them like a tutor to support them, like on a conversation level, please do so because it helps so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hanan. Like, I am so inspired by your story listening to it today. Like, just, I'm so moved. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. So without further ado, we are going to move into the last part of our workshop today. So we are going to have breakout rooms where both employers and immigrant-serving organizations will be able to share their thoughts and challenges and opportunities in recruiting newcomers into the green job sector. So we have regional breakout rooms. So in each breakout room, there is going to be an Immigration Employment Council that is going to facilitate, and we will also have a note taker from PLT Canada. So in the Western Canada breakout room, you will be staying in the main hall here where we're at. And we have Doug, the Executive Director at Edmonton Region Immigration Employment Council. And our note taker is going to be Zach from the PLT Canada team. In the Eastern breakout room, we have, sorry, I meant the Central breakout room, we have Sienna, who is going to be our facilitator. Sienna, who spoke today, and our note taker is going to be Shuria from PLT Canada team. So in the Atlantic breakout room, we have Alita, who is the National Connector Program Manager at Halifax Partnership, and I will be the note taker. And last but not least, we're also going to offer a French breakout room where we have Jerry, the coordinator for the Rural Employment and Language Initiative at Atlantic Immigration Career Loan Fund at New Brunswick Multicultural Council. And the note taker will be Monica. Awesome. So we are going to report back. So I'm going to ask that you keep it for like 2 minutes, and then we'll have the next breakout room report. So Doug, I'm going to ask either you or Zach, whoever you feel comfortable, to report back about what you talked about in your breakout rooms.
Hey, Brittany.
I was just going to say, just to introduce Zach. Zach will give us a little bit of a highlight, but I just, in fear of ageism, and I bequeathed to Zach the responsibility of reporting back to the rest of the group.
So we actually had a fairly small group in ours. It was PLT staff and immigration employment centers. So we just had a good conversation about what some of the challenges are that newcomers might face. And Doug, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but because we have so many employers on the line, I'm curious if an employer was interested in making some meaningful changes to hiring newcomer youth and retaining them, what would be the best way to go about it and connecting with an employment center?
Yeah, well, I mean, the best way to do that is reaching out to the immigrant employment councils that, as was said at the beginning of the session today, reaching out to us, and if we aren't the sort of source of information or maybe a possible collaboration in that process, then we can also be the, sort of facilitate where that might be. In the cases where there are immigrant employment councils, we're pretty aware of who are the sort of partners that would be most effective in the employment sphere, because that's basically, in our case, for example, for Calgary and Edmonton, we are in the mentorship game, and that's in basically helping people to sort of requite their careers in Canada and in Alberta. So that's kind of where we play. We'd love to collaborate with people in that way. And like I say, if it's not a collaboration with us, we can also be instrumental in making a connection for others, with other people that might be more effective.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug and Zach. So now we're going to head over to the central breakout room. And Sienna, I have you or Shuya, whoever you would like, to report back.
I can speak for the central group. So some of the main things that we talked about in our group was needing to highlight these types of opportunities and really the advantages of working in the environment, right? Like being able to be in nature or being involved in nature, highlighting that really as one of the added, values, or one of the added incentives to want to work in the field. And also acknowledging that, you're competing with the more traditional career choices, things that people really widely know about, or know about internationally. And so, similar to the trades, having a better understanding of what kinds of positions are in the green sector, what opportunities are available. Millennials and Gen Zs are often looking for a purpose in a career choice. They're looking for, employers that value the wellness of their employees. They're looking for a lot of these types of things. And so being able to highlight that is important. Creative ways to navigate the traditional challenges. Companies can be involved in that education for prospective youth much earlier. So maybe it's that there needs to be engagement at that high school level, and introducing what all there is in this industry and in this sector, so that young people can be kind of thinking about it, or thinking outside of maybe the confines of more traditional occupations at a much earlier point than when they're already, say, done their studies, or already partially into a different field. Offering team building events and promoting the career to show this line of work is valuable, but understanding that cultural difference of, for instance, some occupations like in the trades are seen as less valuable, or working in a sector where you're growing food, for example, is seen as a lower tiered position than maybe it is in the Canadian context. So helping people to really expand their understanding of these types of occupations beyond maybe what they know of from their own cultures. And when we're talking about what organizations would you recommend people connecting with, local settlement services, PLT Canada, someone had mentioned some funding related to hiring newcomers as well. That was really beneficial. Community resource centers as a way to connect with newcomers, but also to provide resources such as language supports, YMCA Power of Trades, and mental health therapy. I think those were the main key points, but it was a very productive conversation in a short 10 minutes. So
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaylee. So next, Alita, I have you. If you want to share back on what we talked about, I also don't mind hopping in.
Sounds good. I apologize, everyone, for my voice. I'm sick and it sounds terrible. So if I miss anything, or if people don't understand because my voice, Brittany, you can jump in. So I guess just to reiterate what others have said, we also talked about the importance of openness to jobs and getting over those cultural hurdles of the vision or how people view certain jobs and occupations, and that we need to be more open and more aware that these jobs, any job, is also legitimate and amazing. We also talked about language barriers and how it's really important right at the beginning to work on your English in order for you to feel more comfortable and more positive, I guess, about the whole experience. One of our members talked about how if she could go back in time, she would work more on her English to make sure that she felt more confident moving forward. And that's where we also talked about Hanan's point of volunteering and working in the community, because not only does it help you improve your English, but it also helps you network and meet people and get out of your comfort zone. So you build in a whole bunch of other positive attributes because of volunteering. We had a great suggestion by one of our members for looking at funding for job seekers and employers. So if job seekers know of certain funding that's available from the provincial or federal government, that they can go to an employer and say, I'm applying for this position, but I also have this funding. So, you know, if you could hire a tutor for me, or if you could, you know, bring me into the organization, I come with this funding, and that is a benefit for hiring me as well. So knowing what funding is available and what they can access is really helpful for both employers and job seekers. And then finally, we mentioned that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not only important from the top down, but also the bottom up and in the middle. It really needs to be appreciated, understood, and accepted by everyone at the organization in order for it to really be crucial for the organization and accepted by everyone. And I think that's it, Brittany. Did I miss anything?
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. So last but not least, Jerry, I have you if you want to talk about what was discussed in the French breakout room.
Thank you. I'm going to do this in English. We had a small, but I think very dynamic group. We had some older newcomers of 20 years ago. We had some recent newcomers, my colleague Monica. We also had a green employer, originally from Vancouver, now in New Brunswick. The main question from the employer was, because she deals with a lot of nonprofit organizations. In her organization, when she wants to hire people, she usually has to go through the federal system to get subsidies. And there's some people she'd like to hire, but they're either international students who are not obviously PR, or the program says that the people they have to hire have to be citizens. So we mentioned several provincial programs that may exist. We also recommended multicultural organizations that she should get in contact with that could possibly refer her to organizations like the NBMC and others that could refer her to the proper source. Another example that we gave is if she felt so inclined was to look at the AIPP, or now the AIP, the Atlantic Immigration Project, where if she meets the criteria, as in a place where I worked before, where they were a nonprofit organization, they could register and then they could hire. They could actually hire people who are not PRs or citizens, obviously. Another interesting point was that the importance of educating the newcomers about all the services, about the green economy, the green jobs. It's not something that is always visible. There's more than, as was mentioned by some of the presenters, more than just the climate change. So it's very important for the people to understand, when we're talking about green jobs, the green industry, what it entails. That being said, we agree with everything that the presenters did before. They covered so much ground, and they did it very well. And thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry. And thank you all so much for participating in the breakout rooms. It was some really awesome discussions. So before we go, I just wanted to let everybody know that PLT Canada is hosting a career fair on February 10th at 1 to 4 p.m. So my colleague Shuya has put the link in the chat if you would like to attend. I also just wanted to let everybody know that we're having a Maximize Your Green Job Search webinar on January 20th from 5 to 6. My colleague Shuya has also put the link in the chat if you'd like to register for that as well. And we're also having a Create a Personal Elevator Pitch webinar to support newcomer youth before the career fair. So if you have any newcomer youth that might be interested in attending that webinar and want to attend the career fair, the link is in the chat if you want to share that with your networks. Last but not least, PLT Canada has a newsletter. My colleague Shuya also just put the link in the chat for a newsletter where you can stay up to date to all of our programs and events. I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, or if you want a copy of the slides, I know that was a question in the chat, please email me. I can send that out, as well as we will be sending out the recordings. Thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you to our facilitators, and thank you all for coming.